Good morning, members of Parliament, support staff, radio listeners, TV viewers, those following via social media, members of the media, and also some guests we have here with us today. Welcome to the continuation of the public meeting number 23 of Parliamentary Year 2021-2022 of today, Monday, October 17th, 2022. I would like to give a special welcome to the Minister of General Affairs and Prime Minister, Ms. Silvera Jacobs, and her support staff. Good morning. We've established a quorum of 15 members. Please let's stand for a moment of silence. Before we begin, does any member of Parliament wish to have the floor for notifications? I see no need. It is good to note that today's meeting, we have as agenda point for the public meeting, the National Ordinance amending the temporary National Ordinance COVID-19 cuts, employment conditions for civil servants in connection with the phased reduction of the COVID-19 cuts employment conditions for civil servants. Parliamentary Year 2021-2022, number 161, and also could be found under IS 1123, Parliamentary Year 2021-2022, dated July 7, 2022. Parliament received the National Ordinance amending the temporary National Ordinance COVID-19 cuts employment conditions for civil servants in connection with the phased reduction of the COVID-19 cuts employment conditions for civil servants. IS 1123 on July 7, 2022. A Central Committee meeting was held on July 8, 2022 on the subject matter, during which the Member of Parliament posed their questions and the Minister answered these questions. A report has been made on the deliberation in the Central Committee meeting and was sent to the government as well as the members. The government answered this report, the so-called Nota naar aanleiding van het verslag, and this can be found under IS 1258, Parliamentary Year 2021-2022, dated August 31st, 2022. The public meeting of this draft National Ordinance commenced on August 31st, 2022, and the members of the Parliament posed questions to the Prime Minister in the first round. The meeting was then adjourned. On September 5th, 2022, the public handling continued, and the Prime Minister answered the questions in the first round, and the members posed questions in the second round. On this date, government also submitted a memorandum of modification. This is registered under IS 1286, Parliamentary Year 2021-2022. On September 14, 2022, the public meeting continued with the Prime Minister, when the Prime Minister answered questions in the second round, and the members of Parliament was given the opportunity to pose clarification questions. The meeting was then adjourned. On September 19, 2022, the public meeting, during the notice, MP Bryson proposed to have another point added as an agenda point 1 to thank the President of Parliament for her service over the past parliamentary year and to relieve her of her duties these duties. A speaking time of 5 minutes and 1 round was also part of the proposal. The proposal was supported by MP Ponteflet and MP Marlin. The meeting was then adjourned. Today, the meeting will continue with the handling of the proposal of MP Bryson, and the General Affairs and the Minister of General Affairs and Prime Minister, Ms. Silvera Jacobs, have returned to Parliament to provide the answers to the clarification questions posed by Member of Parliament in the second round of the original agenda point of this meeting, hence today's meeting. So now we go over to the proposal presented by MP Bryson, and before we go, I ask if there are any Member of Parliament that wish to have Hoofdelijke Stemming. Roll call. Hoofdelijke Stemming.
Madam Chair, Lady, if I may, good morning, and we're having hoofdelijke stemming on what exactly?
We're going directly to the proposal by MP Bryson to add the agenda point.
So
we're going to be handling that first, since that was the proposal that was placed at the end of the meeting that was adjourned.
And we're going over to the
To the voting of
put
the
this-
adding of the agenda point that was requested by MP Bryson.
Madam Chair Lady, before we go over to the voting, and obviously I will not have an opportunity to speak except to motivate briefly my vote. But Madam Chair Lady, I would need the Chair of Parliament to explain to me under what stipulation that any member can request an agenda point to be added to the agenda. Madam Chair Lady, I have on more than one occasion explained what is understood under a proposal of order. I think it is totally wrong to accept that any member can come at any time to add an agenda point to a scheduled meeting, let alone where the agenda point was nearly completed. And to prove my point, Madam Chair Lady, I am going to ask the Chair of Parliament the following question. I have a request, no, wrongly. Several members of Parliament, including myself, have a request at Parliament to debate the presentation made by His Excellency the Governor on behalf of the government of St. Martin. Madam Chair Lady, you answered the requestors of this meeting requesting two things. One, for us to motivate our vote, and secondly, for this meeting to be held subsequently to the IPCO conference in the Netherlands. Your request, Madam Chair Lady, was complied with. And I'm asking now, if this chair, if this Parliament feels that our rules of order allow me now to say to you, Madam Chair Lady, I would like that agenda point to be put on this meeting today. Is my question. Madam Chair Lady, if the argument, if your response is going to be no, then end with the argument that that particular request by the members of Parliament would require the presence of ministers, and thus you cannot put it immediately on this agenda, then I put the following to you, Madam Chair Lady. Currently, a request has just been made to Parliament for the Committee Inquiry Mullet Bay to come and present to this Parliament what that committee has done until now. That request, a formal proposal, in accordance with our rules of order, at any time, the Parliament can decide to ask an inquiry committee to present to Parliament. So my proposal to Parliament is to ask that. So if your response to my first request to let us then in this meeting debate the presentation by His Excellency the Governor can't happen because we would need ministers to come, then I ask, can I put that official proposal to have the Mullet Bay Inquiry Committee come to Parliament and tell Parliament what they have done in a committee that needed to work for 8 months, approximately 3 years, nearly 3 years later, what has been done and what has been spent. Then I ask that that proposal, which is registered at Parliament, that then be added to the agenda. Saying all of this to make the point, Madam Chair Lady, that if we are going to admit that at any time a member can ask to put an agenda point on an agenda of Parliament, we need no rules of order. Then why the request that you need so many days to request a meeting, 3 members got assigned it, etc. So the point that I'm making is that this proposal that you're going to be putting to a vote, Madam Chair Lady, we're doing it wrongly. We're doing it wrongly. And I would suggest to you, Madam Chair Lady, to get that straight before it's even put to a vote. Thank you, Madam Chair Lady.
Thank you, MP Westcott Williams. MP Westcott. Okay. I will like to take a brief adjournment for 5 minutes, SG. Meeting adjourned for 5 minutes. Welcome back, members of Parliament. Based on the proposal by MP Westcott, it is regulated in Article 52 that before the start of a deliberation on a subject, Parliament may, on the proposal of the President or that of 3 members present in the meeting hall, impose rules regulating the duration of speeches of the members. Now, what's ambiguous is when to add it. So what I would like to suggest is that we discuss this in the next faction leaders meeting to deliberate that. I will now honor also the request by MP Westcott Williams to add as an agenda point for the Muller Bay inquiry to come into Parliament to do a presentation and provide us with an update. But let's first go over to MP Bryson's request. And I note before I adjourned, one members of Parliament request Hope to look at stemming. So let's go to that, and I'll choose a number. The number is 14. Any member of Parliament wish to have the floor for motivation before we proceed with the voting? MP Westcott Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Madam Chair Lady, your reference does not completely / sufficiently cover the point that I have been making and I made. Madam Chair Lady, my reason for highlighting a proposal that I have at Parliament, for Parliament to decide that it is about time that we get some type of account from the Inquiry Committee, Muller Bay. But, Madam Chair Lady, I cannot support that it be added to the agenda for the simple reason that Article 52 does not cover what we're talking about here right now. But nevertheless, Madam Chair Lady, on the proposal that we are supposed to be voting on, is that proposal in writing at Parliament, the one of today, that proposal, the one that we're...
This was proposed during the meeting of September 19th.
So we are expected to
vote on the request of MP Bryson to add the agenda point.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other member of Parliament wish to have the floor for motivation? I see no need. Let's go over now to the voting.
MP Ludmila de Weaver.
My apologies, against.
MP Sarah Westcott Williams.
Against.
MP Hakeem Arundel.
Against.
MP Rolando Bryson.
For.
MP Siddharth Bijlani.
For.
MP Chanel Brownbill.
Against.
MP Solange Duncan.
Against.
MP Christophe Emmanuel.
Against.
MP Melissa Gums.
Against.
MP William Marlin.
For.
MP George Pantoflet.
For.
MP Rayon Peterson.
Against.
MP Hyacinth Richardson.
For.
MP Angelique Rameau.
For.
Chair Lady of Parliament Grisha Helga Martin.
Against. The proposal by MP Bryson is not carried with 6, 4, and 9 against. We now move over to the Prime Minister for her clarification. Prime Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning to you. Good morning to the members of Parliament. Good morning to the Griffier, my support staff joining me, Acting Secretary General Emilia Connor Thomas, and Cabinet Chief of Staff Jessica Weeks, as well as legal advisor, one of my legal advisors, Ayana Lake Terrell. Madam Chair, first of all, thank you for allowing this meeting. It is indeed more than time that this meeting has been recalled so that we can finalize this process. Yes. We really had hoped that this would be finalized a long time ago, and we are now at this position to do so. The clarifications that were requested by MP Westcott Williams related to Article 50, and I was asked to, in layman terms, explain what needed to be done if Article 50 sub B has to be applied. Madam Chair, though I understand that the Member of Parliament is not quite happy with the answers provided, the MP has read the law, and I have read the law also already in the previous handling. I was also encouraged by the organization to reiterate the law out loud once again, but I believe that that will be to no avail, especially if MPs have already decided that the quote-unquote procedure was not followed. The fact is, though, that the procedure described in the law, Article 50, Paragraph 1, subsection B, has been fulfilled, even though the adherence of Article 50 of the National Ordinance on Compatibility has nothing to do with the amendment in front of us. Article 50 is the basis upon which the execution of the payment for the civil servants was done from a financial reporting perspective, relating to, of course, the CFT, which is the purpose of the National Ordinance on Compatibility. So we must be very cautious in convoluting the matters, which I know all MPs do understand. The notification that is being referred to in paragraph 3, or the MP is referring to in paragraph 3 of Article 50, is, as you have indicated, not applicable in this case, as it is for Landsbelang, Article 50, paragraph 1, sub A, which is a different legal route. We have based our actions on subsection B, to which I answer that we have gone beyond what is required by law as we came to Parliament in June, prior to any payments being made, to announce what was coming. As a matter of fact, if I can go back to even months before, where I have mentioned repeatedly that we were looking for ways and means to be able to do so, and to do so legally. The amendment was mentioned then, and I can recall that the Member of Parliament asking for clarifications today said they would decide once they saw the legal document, which is the one that has been before us now since that time. So in that being said, I believe I've further clarified, hopefully, especially for the people of St. Martin, looking for the next one, what the confusion may or may not have been as regards to that. The next clarification was on where is a decrease in vacation days to compensate the vacation pay legislated or proposed to be legislated in this law. As mentioned before, Madam Chair Lady, through you, there is an agreement with the unions, which has been shared in the meantime, on swapping the vacation payment for vacation days temporarily until the LNT is passed, which was the last requirement to be able to decrease the 12.5% cuts. So, of course, once we get to that stage, then there will be no need to further amend the law, as it will automatically go into play as the first step. The third clarification was that the third law that cut school boards and published how they cut the 12.5%, and the MP is was to understand that no school board or subsidized institution submitted to government how to cut their workers, how to make the cuts. Madam Chair, according to me, this is the clarification round. And to my understanding, the clarification will be on the answers that I provided. The questions we have recorded was if we could provide an overview of the school board which paid out the vacation allowance. This new question by the MP had to do with the obligation as mentioned in Article 5 of the National Ordinance on the Cost-Cutting Measures for Semi-Government Institutions, which is also applicable to school boards, subsidized school boards. For clarity to all the members and the public, that is not the National Ordinance that we are amending today. Despite this fact, and the fact that I've already provided the answers, I will reiterate that most of the school boards did submit the requested information, and I got an update just a few minutes ago. I ensured to call. Not all have resubmitted as yet, and initially there was a confusion as to how this application of the law could be made. Some school boards were waiting on an instruction from the minister, which is not his purview to give. I think I explained that more than once. As a consequence, and after several meetings held since then, the school boards having a better understanding of how to apply the 12.5% cost-cutting measures are resubmitting. So there are still a couple school boards still pending to submit, and once they have been submitted, then the overview can be provided. Question 4, or clarification 4, where is it explained why this law does not need to wait for the Ombudsman's term of review? Where is it explained? The elucidation of Article 2 of the amendment, and also in our response, Roman letter 2, let me be clear. So the elucidation of Article Roman 2 of the amendment, as well as our response to the Council of Advice, has that elucidated. And the member also requested that the CFT's advice on our adjustment be sent, and this was also sent. I go now to the clarifications as requested by the MP, Ludmilla de Weaver. For how long will these vacation days be used? As I tried to elucidate a few moments ago, this will only remain held in until we've met the last requirement to be able to remove the cuts. As you all know, we're of the opinion that we do not need this requirement, but it was decided in the RMR that we did. And such, seeing our constitutional status and the hole that we have there, we know the democratic deficit. We can continue to rail against that until we turn blue in the face. But until this parliament handles the LNT, the Landsnormering Top Inkomens Law, and even with necessary amendments, whatever the case may be, until that law has been approved in Parliament, we cannot begin to de-escalate the measures. So once this is in place and the LNT is in place, then the days will automatically revert back to all civil servants. Yeah? And so that is why it was important for us to do this earlier so that they're not withheld so long. Of course, many would be getting antsy as the year proceeds. MP Bryson made some statements on the accountability ordinance. I thank you for sharing your views, which coincides with ours. And then I go to the clarifications from MP Christopher Emmanuel. His request as to, or his statements as to whether this law is to legalize the payment, what law was used to make it not legal, was part of the 3 laws that were not appealed. So what did the PM mean when she said that? I believe that I have answered this question in my previous response to MP Sarah Westcott Williams. But just to clarify to the public, because I believe it is the responsibility of all ministers and members of parliament to not have falsehoods survive and live a life of their own within our community, in fact, causing undue unrest within. You know, everybody's under stress. We don't need to add to it with our sentiments that we know will have that effect. The actions taken by our government to provide relief to civil servants was provided for in the law. We use the legal instruments as prescribed to execute the payment and are now ratifying said actions in Parliament as required by law. The temporary ordinance on the 12.5% cuts for civil servants was approved by a majority of Parliament, retroactive to 2021. MP Bryson has explained, as well as myself, in previous instances when Article 50 comptabiliteit was applied and it was deemed necessary by the then sitting government. So, the Parliament acknowledges and accepts that this is possible. To now question the validity of the application of the retroactive effect and Article 50 comptabiliteit after the legal experts have vetted this trajectory is just causing unnecessary delays, creating narratives that are casting doubt and undermining the process. At the end of the day, via this process, we have started the de-escalation and we would require Parliament's intervention and approval to be able to do so. Again, the Council of Advice made statements that I would I'm sure that the members read in its response to government, and we as government stand by the answers previously given in this regard. I understand that this is a political arena we're in, Madam Chair, and at no point were these measures put on our civil servants as a punitive manner. At the end of the day, just like in your household budget, if you only have X amount of money, you can only pay X amount of bills, and you usually would have to make payment arrangements for the rest, or cut something that is unnecessary. Now, we definitely didn't think it was necessary to cut our civil servants, but these were conditions laid upon us in order to survive. We were at the end of our financial rope in December of 2020. Too often people forget that because now we're almost back to normal. But back then, things were dire within the finances of government, and there was no guarantee that we would be able to pay even the January salaries. And that was the reason why we accepted these conditions, as well as pledged to remove them as soon as possible. And since they're our own laws, we felt we could remove them once we had the finances. We've proven that we have the finances to pay the vacation pay this year, and that is what we did. And now this piece of legislation goes to ratify that decision. I thank the members of Parliament for your attendance to this meeting, as well as for your debate in this discussion, and I look forward to your vote at the end of this meeting. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We have come to the end of the deliberations on the agenda point, and according to Article 57 of the Rules of Order, we now go over to the voting on the draft national ordinance amending the temporary national ordinance COVID-19 cuts employment conditions for the civil servants in the connection with the phased reduction of the COVID-19 cuts employment conditions for civil servants. This, as mentioned before, can be found under Parliamentary Year 2021-2022, number 161, and also under IS 1123, Parliamentary Year 2021-2022, dated July 7, 2022. We will now vote on Articles 1 and 2, the title, the consideration, the draft in its entirety as amended by the Memorandum for Modification, which is under IS 1286, Parliamentary Year 2021-2022. Does any member of Parliament wish roll call? I see roll call, yes. Then I will have to choose a number and ask if any member of Parliament would like to have the floor for motivation. We start at number 6, but I'll give the floor to MP Emmanuel for motivation.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Lady, good morning to you, the Honorable Prime Minister, support staff, and everyone in the Tribune. Madam Chair, it's the reason why I'm voting against this. Madam Chair, the Prime Minister can come and twist the words, turn them as nice as she wants. It is her words, Madam Chair, who said, and I quote, "This law is to legalize the payments that was made." Is it the Prime Minister who said it? The Prime Minister is who said it, Madam Chair, and can't answer the question. So then, if it's to legalize the payment that was made, then what was done before? Can't answer the question, but comes into Parliament and twists the words, bring them how they want, to make it sound as if those who's voting against it is doing something wrong. Madam Chair, this is not getting my support. I said it from day one. It is wrong. It's not a bad precedent, Madam Chair Lady, and this is what you get from this government, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, MP Emmanuel. Next, for motivation, we have MP Pantaflet. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning to the Chair, my colleagues in Parliament, Honourable Prime Minister, those, our Cabinet, of course, that are viewing and listening, Madam Chair. It is a time to play marbles and a time to play chess, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, one of the things you have to keep in mind, and explain briefly why I am voting for this, Madam Chair. I pay keen attention to what is happening all over the world, Madam Chair, where persons are complaining about the fact of the inflation, where the income is reduced in comparison to inflation. United States of America, Europe, Madam Chair, economists are meeting and discussing how to mitigate this. Now we have a law, Madam Chair, to amend in order to ensure that we give some purchasing power back to our people, and you're saying you're against? No, Madam Chair. You have to be serious. Stop playing politics and let's look at what is for the people, Madam Chair. Every cent we can give to them is important. And therefore, Madam Chair, definitely I know when the time comes, I will support this. I'm not playing any games. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Pantaflet. Next, for motivation, we have MP Sarah Westcott-Williams. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady, and a good morning again. Madam Chair Lady, the Prime Minister went at great lengths to talk about the issue of the accountability ordinance and that this law has no financial consequences. Madam Chair Lady, before I continue, I think it's important that persons recognize that following the answering of the clarifications by the minister, in this case the Prime Minister, we have no further possibility for debate. So actually what is said out there now by the Prime Minister, that's in essence the end of the deliberations on this particular topic. It seems to be a situation where we have members of government on this side of the aisle and then the Prime Minister's concurring with what is said over here. But the fact remains, Madam Chair Lady, that when we're looking at the matter of equality across the board and the issue of the presentation, Prime Minister now in clarifications, at the final part of this meeting is going to mention that they have received what the school boards have done with respect to cutting the salaries. We're not only talking about school boards, subsidized school boards here. We're talking about all of the institutions falling under that particular law. So how would I now be able to determine that the government is practicing equality where the de-escalation and reversing the cuts are concerned at this final stage here, when that information needed to be published? So again, I want to reiterate, because that's the way it's going to be spun, whatever word you use there, Madam Chair Lady, and that is that, we holding on to the vacation days until Parliament approves this law and the law that is pending. But the law that is pending on the top incomes have nothing to do with the 12.5% cut of the subsidized school boards and the like. So let's use that argument. I cannot, in my good conscience, vote for this law. As much as I would like this to get behind us, I can't, Madam Chair Lady. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Westcott-Williams. Next, we have MP Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I've said many times throughout this meeting, it is very interesting when you see members of Parliament that have voted for an initial piece of legislation, and then when it comes to the voting, they change their mind. And I think that is very this law, to make it clear to everybody, this law is amending the original legislation that was passed by a vast majority of Parliament. Okay, so at the time, there were a large group of members of Parliament, I think 13 or 14, that said this law is in the interest of the people of St. Martin. An amendment then comes to that law to now make an adjustment to make it possible to give the civil servants even more, to make the brunt of that first law that you passed, to make it less. And for some reason, you try to find any way to say, well, I'm not going to vote against it, Madam Chair. I've said, to his credit, there's one member of Parliament that said straight up, he's voting against everything. Okay, that's a different argument. But when you have supported a piece of legislation and then it comes back in an amended form to improve upon the previous one, I can't understand the logic of now trying to say that we will vote against. Madam Chair, all of the procedures have been back and forth. We've seen previous ministers of finance from the UD come to Parliament without no law, give loans, etc. The Parliament of St. Martin, the legal system, has methodology for doing legislation afteraf, as it's called, and was acknowledged by the Council of Advice. And that's my final point in motivating, Madam Chair. We have had members of Parliament make use of the high councils and say that we have to respect it and we have to consider what they're saying. Madam Chair, that issue of the legislation achteraf, the Council of Advice is saying, cautioning indeed, it should not be done often, but it is not something that is against the law or not possible, else they would have clearly written in their dictum, do not send this law to the Parliament of St. Martin, and that was not their advice. The advice of the High Council was to take those things into account, make the necessary adjustments, and send them on to Parliament, and here we are today. So, Madam Chair, this law will get my support just as it did in the original law, which is now being amended to make the original law I voted for even better. So this will have my support. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Bryson. Next, we have MP Gums. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I find myself a bit torn with regards to this law. I've listened to the discussion between the Prime Minister and my colleagues here in Parliament, and I want to just refer back to that point that MP Bryson made. My hesitation with supporting this law is that I feel rather painted into a corner by government, because this way of handling legislation achteraf, I understand the Raad's statement that it should not be done often, but I'll be honest, I don't trust that it's not going to be done often with this particular government. Needless to say, the civil servants should not have to pay the price for whatever poor negotiation or whatever trajectory that we have committed this country to. So I will hesitantly be supporting the law, but I again have to stress on the hesitation part, and I do caution government to not make this a habit. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Gums. Next, we have MP Peterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning to yourself, to the griffier, to the Honorable Prime Minister and the support staff, to my fellow colleagues, and everybody else tuned in throughout the various media outlets. Madam Chair, I did hear everybody's opinion on the law. Myself, personally, however, coming from a legal background, I have a difference of opinion concerning this law. The Council of Advice was pretty clear in their advice. Bij deze vorm van ex post legitimatie van overheidshandelen, eerst doen, dan vragen, is een hoge mate van terughoudendheid geboden. This means een hoge mate. So if you look at Article 50 of the Compatibiliteitsverordening and we try to see where it correlates, at no point do I think that this falls under what the Council of Advice should see as an uitzondering. So legally for me, this is a conundrum. Of course, the whole spin that has been brought to the table, that the civil servants would not get their money if it's not passed, all of that is out the window, because we see that there is no connection between this law and that happening. And for me, when it comes to the legality of things, I'd like to keep a straight line, and therefore I will not be supporting this law. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Peterson. And next, for motivation, we have MP Duncan. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For me as well, it is an issue and a sort of
Okay, MP Peterson used the word conundrum. But for me, in theory, I have no issue with the law, and I will be supporting it. What I do want to stress on, Madam Chair, is that government fully commits to ensuring that each and every teacher in this country receives, whether it's partial vacation pay, half, a part of it. Every teacher is supposed to get their vacation pay. And so the Prime Minister mentioned that some school boards are reporting as they should on the changes that they needed to make in terms of the 12.5% cuts. But I would ask government to commit as well to ensuring that each and every school board has the subsidy that is necessary to pay our teachers. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, MP Duncan. I see MP De Wever would like to have the floor for motivation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you to the Prime Minister for the clarifications. The only thing that I'll state is that even though I had a question regarding the vacation days, it was still unclear to me and became even more so in the response, because what I didn't get out of it was whether or not people were already being deducted for their, or was it already adjusted in their salaries. Needless to say, I want to reiterate something very important that the Prime Minister said, where she said, where she basically countered any statement saying that Parliament was not alerted to. The Prime Minister clearly stated that prior to paying out the vacation pay, that she had already notified Parliament back in June. So with that, I will have to say, I agree. I agree that we were notified in advance of it. I still am not certain as to the vacation days, but knowing that this is the first step to eliminate or retract and reverse any decrease to the benefits of the civil servants, then on that understanding, which is my understanding, I will vote for and support this.
Thank you, MP De Wever. I see we have come to the ending of the motivation, and then we can go now directly to the voting for the draft. And I give the floor to the Secretary General.
MP Solange Duncan.
For.
MP Christophe Emmanuel.
Against.
MP Melissa Gums.
For.
MP William Marlin. For. MP George Pontiflet.
For.
MP Rayon Peterson.
Against.
MP Hyacinth Richardson.
For.
MP Angelique Rameau.
For.
MP Ludmila De Wever.
For.
MP Sarah Westcott Williams.
Against.
MP Akeem Arundel.
For.
MP Rolando Bryson.
For.
MP Siddharth Bijlani.
For.
MP Chanel Brownbill.
For.
Chair Lady of Parliament Grisha Heidegger Martin.
For. The draft has been approved with 12 for and 3 against. According to, yes? 15, yes? According to Article 88, subsection 1 of the Constitution, 12 for and 3 against, for the record, yes. 12 for and 3 against. According to Article 88, subsection 1 of the Constitution of St. Martin, Parliament shall notify the government that Parliament has approved this draft law in its public meeting of today, Monday, October 17, 2022. I would like to thank the Prime Minister and Minister of General Affairs, Ms. Silvera Jacobs, and her support staff for their presence here today and for providing the necessary information. And before we close, I see that the Prime Minister would like to have the floor. Yes? Prime Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I want to thank the 12 members of Parliament who saw fit to approve this law. While I can understand some of the statements made by those who voted against it, at the end of the day, these amendments, or this amendment, was brought forth specifically to be able to start to de-escalate the measures that the civil servants are feeling. I would like to clarify that as government paying out subsidies that have not been cut, we cannot force subsidy recipients to do anything other than carry out the law. Once they submit how these laws will be implemented, that would be the end of our responsibilities to report on what they have submitted. And of course, within the subsidy ordinance, they have to, of course, the ministers or relevant ministers have to do their due diligence in how they have spent their monies in general. So that remains the case. I think for a lot of persons forget that our civil servants, which included public school teachers, did not receive any vacation pay in 2021, whilst many school boards did. Why were they able to do that? That is based on their purview of how they can spend their monies, as well as their stance that they would not do anything until the law was passed. As such, with our civil servants receiving pay this summer, that already equalized the situation. But in no way can we, let's say, guarantee equality in these cases where you have school boards and other entities with their authorities. Government can only advise, inform, etc. And people keep saying also salary cuts. What we have endeavored to do is not cut salaries, Madam Chair, and to the people of St. Martin, no civil servants' salaries were cut. If that is the case by subsidized entities who had no other way to do it, then that may be the case, but indeed our civil servants' salaries were never cut. We tried our best to maintain only using benefits that could be touched. And so initially we weren't able to use the amount of vacation days that we prefer to use, and now we're able to use those in afwachting and while waiting for the opportunity to completely de-escalate that portion. And then we will continue to do so until the full thing is eradicated. That is our goal. That remains our goal, and the way to do that is to ensure we have the finances to do so. So again, I encourage all those who have that they owe payments to government to make those payments. Government is working diligently to recoup losses that we haven't made or gotten in over the years. This is a financial problem. And when the next law comes, I hope that that also will receive your support, even if you have to amend it to our likeness, because I also believe that no kingdom council should be able to determine for us how our laws that are within our purview should stand. So I encourage you to peruse those, debate those, and even make the necessary amendments to make it palatable for us as St. Martin. And we will continue to fight our fight where we need to fight it at all levels within the kingdom to be equitably treated. Thank you very much for the support, and I look forward to further deliberations in the future laws. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of Parliament. And I want to just say also that today is my mother's birthday, and though she's not with us, I feel her spirit always, and I thank all those who have sent, the reminders. Even though it's not a sad day for me, we celebrate her life and all that she's taught us, and that is what I continue to impart as leader of government here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister, and happy birthday in heaven to Mrs. Jacobs. I'm sure Miss Willenberg, sorry. Yes. Happy birthday in heaven to her. I'm sure she's celebrating and watching over you. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of this meeting, and I thank you all for your participation and hereby close this meeting. This meeting is closed.